there's electronic text and there's electronic text. There's accessible electronic text and there's inaccessible electronic text, in other words. Oftentimes, you may think you're doing your students a big favor by taking your stuff down to Sinclair Library, to the eReserve, and putting it up there. And I need to double check, but I'm 90% sure that when they convert printed materials to PDFs in the eReserve, it is not accessible. Meaning it is just the picture of the text and not actually any text behind it. So you can actually create a PDF that actually has the text behind it, where all you need to do is go File, Save, and save the text, versus having to go through an optical characterization or Kurzweil, something like that, to actually get the text out of it. So that's one thing to be concerned with, is making sure that if you're going to be providing electronic formats of materials, make sure it is accessible.
There's also some simple but not so simple things to think about. For example, I show lots of videos in a graduate seminar I teach, and I always try to find things that are open captioned, have subtitles at the bottom, because for two reasons actually. One is for people who don't hear, and the other is for where English is a second language, and it's really useful, but it's also really hard to find those. So that's something to think about.
Open captioning means that the text is always there, kind of like a subtitle on a movie. It's always there. Closed captioning means it's an option you can turn on and off.
Sometime in the 90s, every TV that was manufactured in this country is required to have closed captioning option. I mean, there are actually some nice uses for it, like if I'm watching TV and my wife is sleeping, for example, and I want to actually hear dialogue, or see dialogue rather, but I don't want to turn the sound on, I can use the closed captioning for that. But in a class situation, I think there's a couple reasons open caption is better. One is because it's there and you know it's there. And the other is not every room that you're teaching in is going to have the ability to look at the closed captioning. The next thing I want to say is more under the category of universal design, but I think it's really important that when we look at syllabi, that there are ways that we can do that so it's easy for people. So again, you'll notice, this is pretty big print. And the reason for that is because what's accessible is 12-point or above. And I forget what this is, but it's 12-point or above. I don't remember what color the PowerPoint showed up as, but I try to type blue on white because that was something I learned in a workshop. And that's the reason for that, is that I'm told that's the easiest one for people with visual impairments to read. So those are a couple things that come to my mind. It's kind of going back to the stool example. I find actually in a lot of the classrooms I go to that there's chairs I don't want to sit in because I find them really uncomfortable. One of the examples I always used when I rolled around in a wheelchair, which I did for a long time, is I would go into a room like this and I'd ask everybody to stand up for a few minutes. And then I would talk about, is a chair a reasonable accommodation? Well, of course it is, but we don't think of it that way because chairs are in every room. So the point of that is to really think about what a student or you as a teacher may need, and to be able to think out of the box. And just to ask really from the beginning of a semester what your students may or may not need to make the classroom more work better for them. And that's not a disability issue, that's a teaching issue.